Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about issues of religion and the sacred, especially those related to issues of geography and human remains. Let me start by just quickly, well, or I'll come back to that later. Before we do get started, I want to really quickly review what we talked about last time, which was from our lectures on issues of sovereignty and self-determination. And so we went about kind of defining sovereignty and its most ideal form, which we call self-determination. This is the ability for a group to really make its own rules, its own laws, and then enforce them in the way that they see is best for them, and to achieve justice in that way, in the way that's best for them. And they know that this has not really happened among pretty much any indigenous groups in North America, because of the ongoing kind of paternalistic relationship between native nations and the state itself, the United States as a broad nation that has a tendency to limit the sovereignty of native groups. And then we also talked quite a bit about how race can play into these issues, specifically the notions of blood quantum and the one drop rule, these kind of socioculturally constructed systems of categorizing people by race, and how those become a really important aspect of how tribes achieve sovereignty, how they get to determine their own membership or don't get to determine their own membership, and how that can be quite controversial. And then we talked lastly a little bit about economic sovereignty, specifically about issues revolving around gaming and some of the benefits and detriments that can come from that. But this week we're going to change gears to talk right now about sacred geography and sacred bodies. And this is going to be a 2-day process because I'm going to have you guys watch a film on this issue as well. And at this point, either you'll have watched that already or you'll watch that after this. I think you can really go either way. I'm going to assume that you have already seen the film, since you can really watch it in whichever order you wish with the online setup of the class. So that film is Who Owns the Past? And so we're going to talk a little bit about NAGPRA and Kennewick Man, which is really the subject of that film, and then we're going to go beyond that as well. And so today what we're going to talk about is kind of defining and exploring the nature of Native American spirituality, being upfront about the fact that that is, if there's 3+ million federally recognized Native people in this country, not even counting people who just claim Native identity in some way, there is a humongous amount of breadth and depth to the way that those people express and experience their own spirituality. But we're going to talk about one kind of aspect of Native spirituality that's quite common, and that is important to their political and economic context that we'll talk about as we go forward in the class. And so the two ways that really happens is through what I'm going to call sacred bodies here. So we'll talk about a law called NAGPRA and Kennewick Man, a particular case study that resulted from NAGPRA. That'll all be clear what I mean by that in a bit. If you have already watched the film Who Owns the Past, then you'll know a bit about this already, but I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail in here. And then from there, we'll talk about the connection between sacred bodies and sacred geographies. That is to say, sacred places, sacred areas of the landscape, which is another really important part of a lot of Native spirituality. And so we'll do that by talking specifically about a place called Wounded Knee, which is a place we've talked about a couple times already, and we will talk about a lot more going forward, including later in this week when we talk about the Civil Rights Movement. We're going to see how Wounded Knee has a deep history with Native people and was an incredibly important place in the Civil Rights Movement, which is one of the things that makes it continue to be continually sacred today. All right, so I'll end the first video there.